Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, Vanny has a back on Cardfight Vanguard deck profile, so because you're under tech, come subscribe and show you. This time we're covering the second deck of set 10, which is Stoicheia Zorga. So, Zorga has had an interesting revelation in the sense that it has evolved into Masques, and in my personal opinion, and maybe the opinion of others too, it's probably the strongest one. Or I think we can all solemnly agree, outside of like right-based power, Zorga's the strongest. Like, just power alone, because of stupid bullshit. But this deck here is interesting because this specific build, it either doesn't work because you bricked hard, or it works and your opponent dies the second you hit grade 3. It has always been one of the two. It is never in between. It's either they die the second you hit grade 3, or you just lose because you bricked. So let's go ahead and get this started, shall we? And that's what I love about this deck, because it's both unpredictable and predictable at the same time. First up today, we have our starter in Dream Nibbling, grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 6k base, auto roll applying 1 second draw card. Standard starter, not much about it. You can really run any starter here, but you know, might as well run the Dream Nibbling because, A, I do have the Mega Legion art thing that sadly Bushy stopped doing in this deck, so I might as well try to show it off, but also in the sense that it just fits the theme. So you can really choose any starter you want because none of the deck really requires Dream Nibbling, but like I said, just do it for the aesthetic. So then we have our Overtrigger and Source Dragon Deity of Blessings Bless Favor. Grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power. Overtrigger, you may have one Overtrigger in your deck. Overtrigger, make a card, draw a card, choose one music, supposed to make for the turn. And if you're during draw check, activate. It's just fluctuates. You can, okay, I don't know what the hell that was. Draw a card, choose one of your units, it gets plus 1 critical over the turn. All your form gets plus 10, and then if you're damaged on the same number of cards of your opponents or more, choose a card from your damage on and heal it. All around, pretty solid. It's an everything bagel. I think I've made it pretty much clear that in terms of effects, this is my favorite Overtrigger, because you pretty much get to do a little bit of everything. Like, you guaranteed to get the 1 mil in a draw, but then if you drove check it, you get to draw again, so you get 2 hand cards. Someone on your board gets a crit, probably the thing you're giving the 1 million to. Someone gets a 1 million, probably the thing you're giving a crit to. And then you get a front trigger, because screw it, and then you get a free heal. Like, this thing straight up does everything, and it's so fucking funny, and I love drive checking this and getting just to be like, okay, cool, I win the game. Or, like, your chances of winning have gone down extremely low because, you know, double critical. I've at least probably healed one, and I have 2 free hand cards, and you're probably not living this turn without dropping all your hand. So Bless Favor is pretty solid. You can run Obari if you want to, but like I said, this deck already has like enough outright power. You don't need Obari unless you want to flex on someone, so one of Bless Favor. Then we have 3 draw triggers in Serene Maiden Lena. Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 4k power, draw turns, cards, Vanguard's grade 0 critical, 5k shield. So, you know, being a 10k shield is pretty nice. Also being able to increase your hand for guard power is pretty nice as well. I used to run fronts in this deck. I did. And then Zorga Masques came out and then made it so that there was no reason to run fronts because, again, outright numbers. So, 3 of Lena. Getting the hand cards is important, but if you want to throw in fronts because fuck it, sure, go ahead. Then we have 8 crits. First up, we have 4 copies of Abyss Temptation. It's just a vanilla. I choose to run this specific one because I do actually have access to the Mega Legion art if I do this, so might as well run the Abyss Temptation for it. And then we have 4 other crits and Aspiring Maiden Alana. This one is like kind of required and kind of not specifically. Like, if you want to run the vanilla crits, go ahead, but I like to have this just in case, because grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k power, critical trigger auto at the end battle, she boosted, put it to soul, choose when you can 2k for the turn. Okay, I've yet to use this in this build, but there have been a lot of close situations where I might have had to use this if I didn't have a choice, or if I didn't get really lucky the following turn. So I'm like kind of more tempted to keep this here until I'm proven that it's consistent, but until then, I'm willing to just keep it just in case. But yeah, we run the 8 crits for pressure because this deck also has triple drive of capabilities, and not to mention the fact that, you know, you can have 2 roaming prism dragons with God knows what. I think the number me and my friend came out to before boosting and triggers is just 45 double critical, and then your Vanguard swinging for triple drive. If your opponent's at 4 damage, no one in their right mind would take that. So, or even at 3 damage, no one in their right mind would take it, but they might end up having to anyway. So yeah, 8 crits for pressure. Then we run 4 heals in LG Pixie, grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 5k power. The heal that I always thought was a dragon until I straight up looked up one day and then realized her face was on here, and then I realized it was an actual card. I still remember that day because I realized that mid-deck profile. I think I may have kept like a straight face during it and never said anything, but I remember the day I realized that was during a deck profile, which is funny. But yeah, 4 of LG Pixie. It's just a solid heal. I don't really like the effect heals too much. They're too situational, being 10k shields most of the time and then only being 25k shields in certain situations. If you want to run those heals because, I don't know, maybe it works for the meta or maybe it just works for you personally, go ahead. But for me personally, because I don't do meta, I'm sticking with my normal heals, but it's up to you what you use here. Then move on to our grade 1s. First up, we have 3 copies of Rogue Headhunter, grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, continues rear guard. If you played in order this turn, it gets plus 5k power. So, okay, all around pretty solid. I love the fact that it doesn't have to Alchemy Magic specifically. So if you want to play like early game order rush, which isn't technically possible in this deck, but it kind of is, just not to a good extent, you can make it a 13k base, which is pretty nice. And then auto, when it's placed on rear guard, the next time you would Alchemy Magic in order and play it this turn, reduce the counter boss by 1. I love, by the way, first up, reduce the total cost. It does not countercharge even if it becomes negative. I love how I've never used that ability, or I rarely use that ability, up to this point, and suddenly with this version of the deck, that ability is probably one of the most important card skills I have ever witnessed, because of how often this deck will go into like a CB run. So, 3 of Rogue Headhunter. He has surprisingly done his job in this deck already 10 times more than he has done in my other Zorga builds. Which is weird, but yeah. 3 Rogue Headhunter. Being a 13k base is pretty nice, more or less, and then also being able just to make my Alchemy Magic cost 1 counter boss less, which, granted, the highest counter boss for Alchemy Magic cost in this deck is 2, and most of the time it's going to be 1, but yeah, like I said, there are times where this deck will run into a counter boss problem, so 3 of Rogue Headhunter. He actually does his job pretty well. Let me have 4 PGs in Planetary Prevent Dragon, grade 1 boost, 0 show, 6k base. Continue Sentinel, you may have up to 4 Sentinels in deck, and all on guard circle. Choose your means, it cannot be hit in battle, and if your hand is 2 or more cards, you can choose a card from your hand, discard it. So basically that means is it's a standard PG, not special about it, and you know, when you're being attacked and you have 1 or less hand cards outside of this thing, you can just straight up throw down the PG, and then you don't discard anything, which is great because that means you can be as aggressive as you want in the early game, and then still have this little bit of defensive on your side, which is great. The issue is that there's no such thing in a situation where that would be useful, especially if you're me, because if you bricked, or if this deck is consistent with anyone else like it is with me, what will happen is you will run into a situation where somehow, by an unfortunate miracle, your hand will end up with like 7 cards that can't guard, and then you have 1 PG, which basically means you can't use the PG skill properly, and you're going to have to bank it on 1 attack not seeing a crit. So, for Planetary Prevent, it's very helpful in the sense that when your hand gets overrun by a bunch of orders and grade 3s, you don't have to drop anything to, you know, defend yourself, or drop anything of use to defend yourself. But, you know, if your hand is low because maybe you went on an all rush and your opponent's still alive, you can just quickly throw it on a PG and you're fine, even if you have like 1 other hand card. So, for Planetary Prevent, solid PG, and you can run Custodial Dragon, but I choose to run this one because it's a part of the old one. Let me have 1 copy of our last grade 1 to the grade 1 of the ride deck, Ranker Chain, none in the main deck. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, active Vanguard, once per turn, Soul Blast 1, draw 2 cards, you have to 1 order card from your hand, discard it, and if you did not discard, choose 2 cards from your hand, discard them. And then choose rear guard if you played in order this turn, gets plus 2k for this turn. Okay, so kind of like a worse version of Rogue Headhunter, but still being able to be a 10k booster is pretty nice. And then this skill. So I forgot what deck it was, but I know I said a while ago, like there was a deck where if I had a specific opening, that I think it was Bastion, where if I saw a specific unit off a fort skill, then it was kind of like guaranteedly game for depending on like who it was, because it was always 1 of 3. Ranker Chain is kind of the same in this deck, where if you don't see an order from this skill, or like if your opening hand isn't in order and you don't see an order from Ranker Chain skill, you have guaranteedly lost. That has been the constant trend of like every game I have lost with Zorga. I don't get an order in my opening hand and I don't get an order off his skill. So then I have to drop 2. I don't know what it is. It just happens. And that's kind of how I know at that point when the game is over. But I still play it through anyway just in case, even though it always results in me losing one way or another. So 1 of Ranker Chain, he's good in the sense that he can get you game set up. But if you don't have an order, you are minusing 2. And for once in this Zorga build, minusing 2 is not a good thing. So 1 of Ranker Chain. I hate the fact I just said the word minus. Let's move on to grade 2s. First up, we have 3 copies of Inheritance Maiden Hendrina, or as I like to call it, card I swear is out of 4 of, and yet I cannot prove otherwise because she keeps showing up. Grade 2, Intercept 5k shield, 10k base. Auto, she's placed on rear guard, you may discard the top 3 cards of your deck. Okay, cool. I love the fact that it's not a mandatory mill 3, but if you want to mill 3, you can, and it's for free, which is great. And then act rear guard, retire this unit until end of turn. The next time you would Alchemy Magic in order and play it, you may choose not to pay all that card's Soul Blast cost. Okay, that ability will never come in handy because nothing in this deck Soul Blasts. Like, or very little in this deck Soul Blast, and none of them are orders, so you can't really use Hendrina's skill to proc off that effect. But being able to mill 3 is pretty nice because, you know, it helps get cards into drop zone, it helps get orders into drop zone, helps get Roaming Prison Dragon into drop zone, basically helps get all your pieces into drop zone, and then proceeds to allow you to do stupid shenanigans, such as get plus 25 to front row on first grade 3 turn. So 3 of Hendrina. Aron, pretty solid. She helps fill up the drop zone, and that's pretty much all I can say about her. And there might be a card in this deck that has Alchemy Magic Soul Blast, and I just might be forgetting it, but I'm pretty sure there isn't, so 3 of. Then we have 4 copies of this thing. Dragon Tree Wretch Adept Elwith, aka the reason why I run into counter boss problems. Great Genius at 5k shield, 10k base. I was gonna say this is the second time I'm seeing it in English because I pulled it up in English last night when I was setting up this deck for the deck profile today. And oh my god, that thing looks beautiful. I don't know why, it just looks so different from its Japanese version. Anyways, auto when it's placed on rear guard by counter bossing one and soul bossing one, you choose one of your rear guards without any Draco Tree markers on it, and you put a Draco Tree marker on it, and then search deck to one Mask of Harudagarm, reveal it, add it to your hand, and shuffle your deck. And it's just good. Like, this deck, like I said, may run into soul problems on occasions, and it definitely will run into counter boss problems, especially if you use this thing more than once. So there's that. But at the same time, being able to get a Draco Tree marker, which gives your thing more power, and then being able to search your deck for an order, which you can then use for Alchemagic worst case scenario, is just good. Like, genuinely, this card is just so good for Zorga, because Dragon Tree marker that has 5k plus, and then you get an order which you can then use for Alchemagic or drop fodder or something else of the sort. Either way, Adept Elwith is just a solid grade 2, and it's just nice having. 4 of, it does its job well in this deck. The only issue I have with this is the counter boss problem it will cause later on, but that's only a matter of if I lose, so 4 of. Then we have our last Great 2, and that's 1 of in the ride deck of Black Tears Husk Dragon. Great 2 and SF 5k shield, 10k base. Auto is placed on Vanguard, but you can choose up to 1 normal order from your drop zone, put it to your hand. Again, if you don't see an order either from your opening hand or this thing skill, most likely you're not going to draw into an order to proc off Black Husk, so sadly that means you'll probably just have a brick Grade 2 turn, and again, that's how you can kind of tell if you're going to lose the game or not. But cool, being an on-place Vanguard circle, you get a free order back, basically making a ride deck free or making Raker Chain more or less free is pretty solid, and then continues rear guard if you play an order this turn, gets plus 5k power. Okay, this deck can go on a like a ram hunt and just call a bunch of stuff from drop in a turn. So frankly, you could have a very open board, like nothing on your board, and you can straight up call everything, and anything in your drop zone is essentially free targets, which is great because you know you can have a 15k base Black Husk, you can have a 10k base Raker Chain, a 13k base Rogue Headhunter, and then you can have either of these two just come down to either mill more cards or make more Dragon Tree markers and make things get more power. Either way, pretty solid because again, he doesn't have to be placed from hand; he can be placed from drop, which you can combo the hell out of in Zorga, which I actually did once when in this deck's early build, which both was worth it and wasn't worth it at the same time, but I loved it doing the play. Either way though, Black Tears Husk is a solid grade 2, get you orders back, make a ride deck free, and 15k base on rear. So 1 of in the ride deck, none in the main deck because you can just soul boss out and then call it from drop zone if you really need to call it. Then move on to our grade 3s, and then after the grade 3s we will get to the orders and the Dragon Tree marker. We have 4 copies of Roaming Prison Dragon. I still remember when this thing came out, I used to think it was bad because I didn't understand how it actually worked. And then literally the second I saw someone else play it in the video, I immediately went to go shove it in Zorga, played it, and then gave my friend PTSD from this. So now every time my friend plays Zorga, plays against Zorga, the first thing he realizes is that I'm about to Roaming Prison Dragon his ass. So grade 3 Generic Persona, 13k, 5k base, I always forget that. Auto drop zone, when you play in normal order, you may call this card to rear guard, and if you called this card, perform one of the following, and if you did an Alchemagic this turn, perform all the following instead. So he either gets plus 10k for the turn or he gets a critical for the turn. So pretty solid the fact that the first thing you can do when you get to grade 2, because there are grade 2 orders in this deck, is you can play a grade 2 order and then call this boy out from drop zone, because it didn't have to be an Alchemagic for the effect to go off you unless you want both, but you call from the drop zone, either get a crit or plus 10k. In this build, most of the time I get plus 10k, but in my other builds where I have grade 1 orders, I normally get the crit, so I can force out a little bit more pressure in the early game, because yes, you can do this while you're at grade 1 if you run the grade 1 orders, but you know, being able just to call it out is pretty solid. Add a little bit of rush to the opponent in the early game, and then next turn when you send it back to drop zone, you can just revive it with your Alchemagic, and then he gets a guaranteed plus 10k in a critical, and maybe an extra 5 depending on where you are in the world. Either way, Roaming Prison Dragon is just a solid grade 3. It adds pressure. It is the most dangerous thing anyone has ever seen from Zorga, and the second your opponent gets to 3, it suddenly becomes a lot harder to debate on what you're taking and not, because you normally have 2 Roaming Prism Dragons somewhere in the 40s without the sake of boosters or triggers, and then you have your Vanguard that probably has a double critical or probably will get a double critical to the point where your opponent can only take 1 attack this turn, and they probably have to take 2 of them because they can't guard the other one. So 4 of Roaming Prison Dragon, solid grade 3, nothing I can say bad about this, it's just a good card, 4 of. Then we have our grade 3 in the ride deck, which is 1 of copy of Mysterious Range Spiritualist Zorga. So grade 3 Generic Persona, 13k base. Contains Vanguard. When you would play a normal order, you combine a normal order with a different card name from your drop zone and Alchemagic it. So combine the cost and add the effect to the back, and then act Vanguard once per turn by counterblasting 1. Choose a card from your drop zone and call it to rear guard. Okay. It's a solid skill. It can Alchemy Magic for free, which is pretty nice. And then, you can call out this from the drop zone, get another Draco Tree marker, and get the Mask of Hirudegarm to set up for the Mask has Zorga. You can use Hendrina to mill stuff more and possibly get orders into drop zone for the Alchemy Magic skill. I know I've had to do that a few times. Maybe get this out in case you have something in drop. I don't know, or just call something just to call over this so you can get into drop so you can abuse it with Alchemy Magic. Either way, Zorga's pretty solid. There are no extra copies in this deck because you don't really need the Persona Rite of this one specifically. Unlike the other Mask has decks where I think it's warranted to run multiple copies of the original grade 3s, and this one I don't think it is because the outright power the deck can get is fine, and considering what Zorga's skill to replace it is ends up becoming, it's not really worth it. It's like a one-of thing that, yes, has happened to me on constant occasions, but it's a thing I only need to use once, and then afterwards I'm pretty much set for games. So one of Mysterious Rain Spiritual Zorga. It's a solid card. If you want to run extra copies of it, just in case for Mask Hesco, go ahead. But I don't because I like space. Space is the reason why I don't. So one of in the right deck, none in the main deck. Speaking of Mask has Zorga, we have this thing which had me hyped up for set 10 the entire way through. Teasing Spiritualist, Zorga Masques. Okay, first up, biased because Moon. Anyways, grade 3 turn Persona 13k base. I gotta say, I love this thing's angle. Even though it just looks like the original Zorga, I love its angle. But continuous, it can only be written from a grade 3 Zorga in its card name, so that counts itself. I love how it has 4 skills and 3 of them are continuous. Continuous Vanguard, the thing that broke this card. When you would play a normal order, you can bind a normal order from your drop zone in Alchemy Magic. Okay, for those of you wondering how this is different from this one says they have to be different named. This one just says Alchemy Magic it. Yes, it means that if you have 2 copies of the same order, one in hand and one in drop, you are allowed to do it as long as they're both normal orders. It is possible, and this can lead to some stupid shit. How do I know? Because I've pulled it off against my friend, and now he has PTSD of this. But ignoring that, he has another continuous ability, which is also very good, and that's Continuous Vanguard. If you did Alchemy Magic this turn, all your front rows get plus 10k for the turn. Okay, so you Persona Ride, you use this thing skill, use one of the orders I have twice, you can get a total of free plus 30 to your front goddamn row. And then you have 2 roaming Prism Dragons. Those things are 45k, double critical beat sticks without Dragon Tree markers on them, boosters or triggers. And if you put Dragon Tree markers on them, they are 50k, double critical beat sticks without the sake of triggers or boosters. Screw logic, I guess. And then his other skill, the one that requires Zorga. So this ability is a legitimate once per game, because there's no way in hell you're getting the Zorga back once you do this. Active Vanguard once per turn. Move a card with Zorga in its different card name from your hand, soul, or drop zone. Choose a card from your drop, call it to rear guard if it's a unit, and put it to your hand if it's a normal order. So, either get a rear guard or get a normal order, which I most of the time I've never used it to call rear guard. I've normally just used it just to get an order back, because normally I don't have an order in hand. So fair enough, all around solid skill. Allows you to Alchemy Magic for the turn, most likely, or it allows you to get a rear guard if you really need a rear guard. Gets a fuck ton of numbers off his skill alone. Allows you to do some stupid shit by double Alchemy Magicing with the same card. And it just has so many questionable antics to it that can lead to such stupid bullshit. 4 of Zorga Masques. Very powerful card in terms of outright numbers and what it can unleash. And the second this thing comes out, the floodgates have been opened and hell will now seep out from the abyss. 4 of Zorga Masques. It's just good. Then we move on to our orders. First up, we have 2 copies of the Grade 2 Order and Tearful Malice. So play it by retiring 2 rear guards, draw a card, put it to soul, and countercharge 1. Okay, on occasions with this boy, soul can become a problem. So being, like I said before, being able to send an order to soul is pretty good, and then you can draw 1 and countercharge 1 to reset the counterblast. So all around, pretty solid card for pretty much dealing with this thing's problems, and it can also retire 2 rear guards. Therefore, especially with how rulings work, send Prison Dragon to drop zone for the cost, and then look, because you do the cost first before you do the order play, and then you just I Alchemy Magic and it's in drop zone for it. Just gonna call this out and then proc off its abilities, because screw it. 2 of Tearful Malice. It's just a good card, and it has been one of my favorite orders of all of Stoicheia, and that's probably the reason why it's pretty much in all of my Stoicheia decks more or less at some point. 2 of. Then we have 2 copies of Mask of Hirudegarm, because the rest of them are all grade 3 orders. So grade 3 normal order, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 unit card with Draco Tree or Masques in its card name from among them, reveal it, put it to your hand, and shuffle your deck. So, either get Zorga over here or get Illwith. And then, if it's in your drop zone, act drop zone. If you have a grade 3 Vanguard without Masques in its card name, reveal a grade 3 with Masques in its card name from your hand. So basically Zorga over here. Shove it to your soul, and then ride the revealed card as stand. And if you rode, put this card into soul. If your opponent's Vanguards of grade 3 or greater, and you did not Persona Ride this turn, you can activate Persona Ride. Okay, so here's the stupid thing about this. First up, you get a free top 5 search, which is great. So, like, worst case scenario, if you have to Alchemy Magic this with something, which I have had to do on some occasions, you can, which is fine. But being able to get, I don't know, a free Persona Ride going second if your opponent's at grade 3 for their first grade 3 turn, and you're at grade 3 for your first grade 3 turn, and you went second, you get a free Persona Ride, which is pretty fucking nice. But then also, which is something I just kind of noticed about this card, technically you don't have to use this with its assigned mask. Like, yes, it's going to make more sense to run the Leonore mask with Leonore, but you are able to use this to Persona Ride from Zorga into the Leonore mask if you wanted to. I'm not saying you should, I'm saying you can, which is interesting to say the least, but all around solid skill, and not to mention the fact that thankfully for Zorga skill, if you have to play orders, because I know there was one occasion where I had to play this to get a Zorga because I didn't have one in hand, thankfully what you can do is, since it's continuous, it means if you Alchemy Magic at all that turn, you can just still get the plus 10, so even if you played the Alchemy Magic before you rode into it, if you still have Mask has in the drop zone, you still have it to Soul, Persona Ride, plus 10 to front row from his skill, plus 10 to front row from the Persona Ride. All around pretty solid skills that you can proc off with this. Free top 5 search is pretty nice for one of your main playmakers, and not to mention the fact it can get you a Persona Ride and a Soul card all at once. So 2 of in the deck, it's just good to have. Then we have 2 of Gather Upon Me, Ye Wandering Souls. I was wrong. Apparently there was another grade 2 order here. I just forgot to change the order of the cards. So grade 2 normal order, play it by discarding an order card from your hand. Choose one of your Vanguards, go a drive for the turn. I love how I used to hate this thing because I felt like dropping an order was too hefty for a cost and just like screwed me over a little bit. And then the second I start playing it in this deck, it just does so much consistency. My other Zorga builds failed miserably. I would never be able to play this card. In this version of the build, which I believe has less orders than my other Zorga builds, granted by only 2, but still, I am somehow pulling this off more consistently here than I pulled it off in the other ones, which is stupid, because I'm literally pulling this off every game, except for one, which is the game I never drew into any of them. So 2 of Gather Upon Me, Ye Wandering Souls. Gets triple drive, immediately puts pressure for Vanguard, and when you already have 2 big-ass columns that have pressure on them, and then you have Vanguard, which has triple drive, which suddenly makes people realize, oh god, their chances of drive taking a crit have gone up extremely. Yeah, you kind of realize that you have the opponent held by the balls, and they can't really do anything about it. So 2 of Gather Upon Me, Ye Wandering Souls, just a good, solid order. Then we have our last card in the deck that is a part of the main deck, to my memory, and that is grade 3 normal order, Clouded Misma. Still one of my favorite orders from Zorga. Play it by counterblasting 1, choose a grade 3 less card from your drop zone, call it to rear guard, and if it was a part of Alchemy Magic, whether it was the front or the back, choose one of your Vanguards, and it gets continuous Vanguard, all your front units get plus 5k until end of turn. So, just using normal Alchemy Magic, you get a call, and probably going to proc off double roaming prisons, or at least one of them, so you can get more power. But then you get a free 5 to front row, and then if you went into this thing this turn with the Persona Ride, that's an additional plus 25. And normally what I do is I proc it off with Gather Upon Me, Ye Wandering Souls by dropping this specifically, so I have plus 25 to front row with triple drive on first grade 3 turn. But you could also pull double Clouded Misma and just get rid of the extra drive in exchange for plus 30 to front row. Yeah, this thing can cause problems and just, make your board kind of not worth guarding. 2 of Clouded Misma. It's fun. That's all I can say. It's just fun to pull off. Then we have 5 copies of Dragon Tree Markers because there's no way in hell you're going to pull off 5 of them, and if you do, you have my respect because the game should not go that long at all, but if you manage to do it via, I don't know, Divine Intervention combo spamming, good on you. Anyways, during your turn, if a Vanguard, Dragon Tree, or Masques in its card name, all your units on the circles get plus 5k power. So, typically put it on the circles you're going to call these things too, so, they're bigger bases, so at least 10k bases, plus the additional 10, plus whatever the hell you do with Zorga over here. So, yeah, there's nothing much about it. Then put it in the back row, once you're done pumping up the rear guards to bigger extents. But the highest amount I've got in this deck was 3, and that was because I got lucky, and you don't really need more than 2. 2 is banking. You really only need 1, but 2 is nice to have. So 5 Draco Tree Markers. If you ever get 5 Draco Tree Markers, good on you, but the game really shouldn't go that long for you to be able to do that, because the amount of counter boss and soul boss you'll have to waste on that is not really worth it, but it's possible. And that's it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. All around this deck, like I said before, it's one of 2 things. Either you brick because you didn't see a single order in the early game and you lose because of that, or you don't brick and you basically win the second either of you get to grade 3. It's dumb, and it's funny, and you beat the shit out of your opponent with big numbers. And if you're wondering why I'm running Blue Zorga over Red Zorga, it's because I like Blue Zorga's ability to call stuff and have a little bit more of a control feel while I'm waiting out the Masques rather than Dead Sea, who also costs me Soul, which means slowly over time, especially because Death Elwith requires Soul too, and I actually do need to get to Masques to do skills, obviously, means that I'm kind of risking a lot, and I don't really need to constantly be able to Alchemy Magic from the hand, as long as, I can Alchemy Magic later with Masques. So if you want to run Red Zorga, go ahead, but I did try Red Zorga, and it just felt really weird to me, so I prefer Blue Zorga instead for this one. Either way, I'm going to end it here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and follow on Twitch, and I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to stand up your Vanguards.